I'm going to break down a deal that was the bane of my existence for a while. And this is a wholesale deal from hell. And it ended up being pretty profitable. But boy, oh boy, if I knew what I knew now, I would have thought twice about getting involved with this property. And this really boils down to you need to be a problem solver and you need to have experience in order to really be successful in this business. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Greg. I've been a full-time investor now for 10 years. I've flipped 500 properties. So everything you're going to learn on this YouTube channel or on this podcast is real world information. This is real deals that I'm going to break down. This is lessons that I've learned the hard way. So if you get value from this video or any other video I put out or podcast, if you're watching, if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the video. If you're listening, if you could share the audio with somebody else. And if you're a super fan, if you can repost this on your social media, it would mean a lot to me. So let's get into it today. We're talking about a property that closed up in Ulster County, New York. I'm not going to dox the address or even the town for that matter, but there's a lot of lessons I learned here on this property. And boy, oh boy, was it stressful. So first things first, got the lead from direct mail. They received a letter from us. They wanted to sell the property. They didn't live in the area. And, they wanted to just kind of get rid of it. They didn't really want to net much money. They just wanted to pay off the mortgage, pay off some of the other stuff owed and walk away from it. So pretty easy acquisition in terms of getting the numbers worked out. But there was a situation happen where it wasn't vacant. There was somebody at the property and we had to work on getting the person in the property relocated, basically, to say the least. And that was definitely not the easiest thing in the world, and it was not cheap. But nonetheless, ended up coming up with something that worked for everybody, despite that being somewhat stressful. And what I had going on here is the whole time I'm working on that situation with the occupant, I went and I found an end buyer for this property because I was going to rehab it myself. But then I'm like, you know what? I got a lot of projects going on right now. We got a little bit of a lumpy pipeline with some clogs. So let me wholesale this off to somebody and we'll see what we can get for it. So I ended up putting it out to the buyer's list. Ended up getting originally a pretty good offer on this from a buyer who I did not know from Adam. I never knew this guy. We ended up going into contract with this buyer, but he threw some little sneaky weasel clause in there, which I didn't really look into. And he ended up using that weasel clause like 2 months into the sale, and he ended up bailing at the last minute, which is no good if you're a buyer. Do not do that. You will never deal with a wholesaler again if you screw them over. Anyway, I won't deal with the guy again, to say the least. It's all good. That's part of the game. So anyway, he bailed. So I was like, I'll just buy it myself. And then I'm like, you know what? Let me see if I could get someone else to take this. I ended up getting, the property out again. I emailed it out again and got somebody, actually a realtor brought a buyer for me. So it ended up closing today, thank goodness. And it ended up being a pretty good profit on paper. But despite the profit, there was a lot of headaches with this property. First of all, we made a mistake here where I decided to use the preferred title company for this attorney that I was using. And the attorney I was using is great. But the title company they recommended, they probably aren't a bad title company, but when it comes to like communication and hairy files and getting problems solved with, urgency and diligence, they were not good. This is the title company. The attorney was great. But the title company just couldn't get him on the phone. There was just a lot of back and forth. And I ended up having to basically get rid of this title company right before the house closed because I couldn't get the guy on the phone who was the decision maker. They just didn't give a shit. So it's funny. So while this is going on, I called my main title company, who I normally use, who I should have used the whole time here. And they're like, oh, well, that's easy. We can get that done. No problem. So it turns out they got the deal done like 3 weeks after I called them. No issues. They're on top of it. They took care of everything. They're easy to communicate with. All the things you need in a good title company. And I'm going to give the shout out to the title Green Acre Abstract in Newburgh. They are phenomenal. If you're in the Hudson Valley or actually anywhere in New York, you want a good title company, call Green Acre Abstract over in Newburgh. They are fantastic. Got to give them a shout out on this one. So anyway, they got it done. They did a little escrow hold back with some stuff that was owed on the property. The buyer agreed to use this title company, which is huge. If you're doing a wholesale deal, you want your buyer to use your title company so you don't have to restart the process. And overall, this was a good property. It ended up working out, and then everyone was happy at the end of the day. It was a real dogfight to get to the finish line. But anyways, I got to give you some lessons here that are really important on really when the properties get like crazy and stuff, and there's a lot of moving parts. Here are some lessons you can learn. So first of all, you need to have a good title company who understands what's going on, right? I made the mistake on using a recommended title company, and they just aren't good for real estate investing deals. And especially when there's title issues and there's outstanding debt owed on properties like this title company, and I'm not going to dox the title company that didn't do a good job. They weren't good. I'm going to be honest. Their communication was poor. They didn't treat this, like it was that important. And I just didn't feel like I was getting any value from the title company. So I told them I'm going to switch to another title company who I know, and I've made the right decision moving over to Green Acre. So don't use a referral on a title company from an attorney or whatever. Use your title company that you're familiar with if you have a hairy property. That's my first recommendation for you, especially if this title company that you're going to use knows what they're doing. Stick with them. That's always going to make this easier. Lesson number 2 here is I had a buyer for this property, and this is the first buyer, not the second buyer. The first buyer, they told me what I wanted to hear. They gave me the number that I wanted, but they snuck in this little weasel addendum that I shouldn't have signed ultimately. And it got them a get out of jail free card. And I should have told this buyer, listen, dude, I'm not going to sign your addendum. You're taking this property as is, where is, the way it sits. And if you don't want it, I got 3 other people lined up to take it. I didn't do that. I agreed to his addendum, and they wasted my time for, 2 months when ultimately I could have sniffed that out right away, and I would have had this other buyer in there right away, or would have had the first buyer actually close. So that buyer, like I said, not a good look on his part. I get he's got to look after himself, but at the end of the day, like, dude, you're buying a house basically at 50 cents on the dollar. Like, you're going to take a risk, but how much of a risk are you really taking? So anyway, that was frustrating, but, I should have basically told the buyer originally, like, I'm not signing your addendum. You're either taking this property as is, or I'm selling to the next person. When you're the seller, it doesn't matter if you're wholesaling or you're buying the property and you're the owner and you're flipping it to somebody else, you have leverage as a seller, assuming you have enough demand for your product. In this case, I did. So when you're the seller, you can dictate the terms. Hey, this is what I'm going to accept. This is what I'm not going to accept. I'm not taking this rider. I'm not taking this addendum. This is not going to happen. So if you're not going to agree to these terms that I need, I don't care what your price is. I am going to the next person. And you have to be like that, or else you're going to get jerked around by a lot of people. So for this situation, the other buyer who ended up taking it, I told them what was up. I told them, property needs a bunch of work and there's drama and blah, blah, blah. And they were okay with it, right? And I told them that up front, and they knew what was going on. They really wanted the property, et cetera. And they were willing to put the deposit down and this, that, and the other. So that all worked out fine and dandy. And, another thing I've learned too in this business, especially if you're like assigning contracts or doing double closes, is if you have a really good wholesale deal, if your first buyer bails, if it's truly a deal, someone else will buy it right away. Like, I had a property 2 months ago where the buyer literally bailed at the closing table like a meat stick and lost his deposit. And I sold the property 2 hours later to somebody else for actually more, a little bit less money, but we kept the deposit. So it ended up being more money because it was a good deal and it made sense, right? And this property, good deal, makes sense, good location, good house, etc. Sold it right away. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. But if you run into trouble when you're wholesaling is when you don't have a good deal on your hands. You find some, guy who just wants it, for whatever reason. It's probably not a good deal if there's only one person who wants it. And you put all your eggs in that basket, and then that buyer doesn't close. It's going to be hard to sell that deal again, right? So when you have a good product, if your first buyer bails, you'll be able to resell it no problem. That's, I guess, lesson number 2, and a long-winded answer there is make sure your contracts with your buyers are tight. And that's how you get deals to stick and you don't get your time wasted by other buyers. And now the third lesson here, which is a very macro lesson, and I've said this before and I will say it again, you get paid in this business in direct proportion to your ability to solve problems. And this was not a deal for the beginners. You needed to have experience, and thankfully I do in this situation, because this one was hairy. Title problems, occupant problems, buyer problems, vendor problems with title company, just a lot of headwinds we had to deal with for a while. But I knew that if we just keep isolating these issues and attacking them one step at a time with the right squad in place, we were going to get this to the finish line. And we ended up getting it to the finish line today, which is always good. So you need to understand most properties are going to be hairy like this one. And I've done videos before on deals that have been super easy and no drama, and it's like the baby that never cried. But that's not the truth. If you're dealing with off-market, distressed real estate, you're going to sign up for problem solving basically all day. And that's why, you got to understand when you get hit with these obstacles and you do have a deal on your hands, you got to see it through. You got to isolate the issues one step at a time. And that's how you get these properties to the finish line, so the buyer can flip it and make money, so the seller can get the money you promised them, so you can make some money as a wholesaler. So it's really important. You got to be a problem solver. Your income is in direct proportion to your ability to solve problems, right? And in real estate, you could solve pretty big problems because these houses ain't cheap. And when you do that, you get paid a lot of money. Go figure. So that is the third lesson. And if you are in the Hudson Valley, like where this house was, or you're in the state of Delaware, where we've done business, or you're in the Seattle area where I happen to live, and you have a house you want to wholesale to me, if it is a good deal, I will buy it if the numbers make sense and I like the property, right? So if you got a deal you want to wholesale me, send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com, or drop me a DM on Instagram at grego_37. And by the way, if you're still watching it by this point, don't edit this out yet. Here's one more nugget on this property. If you really think about this business, if you really boil it down to the weeds, you want these properties to be hard, because when they're hard and they're not easy and you get hit with a lot of resistance, it keeps the competition away. Because when there's a barrier to entry, whether it's a money barrier or a complexity barrier or any sort of barrier, it keeps the garbage out, right? You might get people that come in and out of this business like a fiddler's elbow sometimes. But the truth is, this is a freaking hard business and there's a lot of drama. And if you know that the opportunity lies in the drama and the BS, that's what keeps an invisible moat around this business, and only the ones who are persistent stick around for the long haul. Anyone can kind of come in and out of this business and do a deal, but if you want to be in this business for the long haul, embrace the challenges, because they're always going to be there in real estate investing. So hopefully you got value from this. If you did, like the video, subscribe. If you're listening, share it with someone else. If you're a super fan, repost on social media, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.